Welcome to NC Political Tea, the show where North Carolina's political scene gets served piping hot, grassroots style. We're here to shake up the status quo with unapologetically conservative takes and a whole lot of Southern charm. From the halls of Congress to under the dome, we're exposing the deals, the drama, and the dirt that the mainstream media won't touch. Who's fighting for your freedom? Who's selling out to the woke mob? And who's about to get roasted? No fluff, no filters, and absolutely no time for spineless politics. Just bold Republican commentary, sharp analysis, and enough sass to make the left squirm. So grab your sweet tea or something stronger, and let's dive into the hottest headlines and juiciest scandals rocking the Tar Heel state. This is NC Political Tea, where the truth always gets served.
And you got to check this out. Okay, that is an armband. Hamas armband, while homeboy has the Mexican flag. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Hi, Sloan. I'm fabulous. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just stressed. What you're watching, you guys, is not the fall of Baghdad. You're watching Southern California over the past weekend. And I think these riots are much, much worse than BLM for the simple reason that they're actually made up of foreign fighters with a clear intent to invade this country and take America down from within. Every flag's being waved, even a Hamas flag I saw. Look, when Trump first took office in 2016, he cracked down on illegal immigration. And then, as with now, that's why he was elected. Then Biden came in, opened the borders. 10 million that we know about are here in this country illegally. And that doesn't even include these visa overstays, which is what the guy was in Colorado, the Egyptian animal that came in here and tried to burn Jews to death last week and damn near did it. So now Trump is back. He's already shut the border down. Sean, as you know, we've talked about this on every show. He's ramping up ICE in the interior of this country, as he said he would, to get people out who are here illegally. Look, most people who cross the border, they do cost taxpayers money. I mean, it's just a fact, from healthcare to transportation to our school system, and we know that. And look, most of them are on welfare. I don't care what the Democrats say. This isn't about them being good or bad. It's about them breaking the law in this country. Trump was elected for law and order. I don't know why that's controversial. Even if it hasn't been done in Democrat cities in literally decades, should not be controversial. So all this started last week. ICE operations in LA, routine ones, by the way, sparked protests. Federal agents were at a couple spots. Over 1,000 protesters came in, and some of them violently attacked ICE officers. I think you and I talked about that over the weekend. A dozen were arrested. It just kept going on. And it's really wild, Sean, how people think that they can come into America and that we are so lawless here that they can protest federal agents doing their jobs. I mean, you see that protesters they're waving Mexican flags, etc. Not from our country, other countries. They're literally invaders. Things have been intense all weekend. National Guard members, Homeland Security, Border Control, they were sent out to multiple sites. By the afternoon, as you can see on Friday and then on Saturday, protesters were surrounding cops, surrounding police stations, officers used tear gas, etc. The fact is, Democrats think this is normal. which scares the hell out of me and probably every other American. See, though Trump learned in 2020 that Democrat mayors and governors, they're going to sacrifice their own people to try to make him look bad for enforcing the rule of law, to make him look bad because of all the violence, and they want to blame him. So he's not fucking around now. He's sitting out in the National Guard, and Title 10, Section 12406 gives him that power legally. And he says he's going to use the Insurrection Act again. Why? Because Democrats, that's why. Their acceptance, their facilitation of violence is scary and it's dangerous as hell. And again, I just want to underscore this. I don't understand what they think their end game here. I mean, Governor Newsom of California said he's going to sue President Trump. And he said this is a deranged fantasy of a dictatorial president. For deploying the National Guard, as is his right to do. Disappointingly, but not surprisingly, Josh Stein, our governor, said, "I've got your back, bro." Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, of course. He has Newsom's back. He signed on to an open letter with other crazy Democrat governors. Well, here's the thing in the letter. This is the first thing that I highlighted up here. Sean, you'll actually see that he acknowledged borders. So they know what it means. But incredibly, he claims that restoring order in neighborhoods in California erodes public trust. No, Governor Stein. Governors who tell their law enforcement agents to stand down and put hundreds of thousands of residents at risk, that erodes public trust. Also a dereliction of duty. That's why Gavin Newsom needs to be removed. I had to go on my rant. My rant is over. I yield to thee.
Well, there's a lot to respond to there. I think you covered a couple things that I think are worth touching on. First, I find it the most ironic that these protesters, they're not protesters, they're rioting, but
they're invaders.
They're waving the flags of the countries that they're simultaneously seeking asylum from, many of them, right? They're saying we ran away from these countries, and and the Democrat story, is, we have to be, kind-hearted to them and understand that they're trying to seek better life, but they're simultaneously waving the flags of the countries that they refuse to go back to and the countries that they are, quote unquote, seeking asylum from. These mayors and governors that you touched on, Newsom as one of them, look, bring it on. Like, bring on the court cases. Let's go. We know that Trump has the legal authority to do this. These mayors and these governors have lethal cases of Trump derangement syndrome. And, they scream that they want equal justice under the law and that the Republicans are undermining democracy. But at the same time, they want to throw the book at Trump over some random, they're trying to find anything that they can to throw at him to stop him from getting elected. But they want to ignore the laws when it comes to these migrants. They want to pretend that the laws don't exist. The laws are on the books. There's nothing that you're going to do to stop us from enforcing them. What I think is interesting about these riots in particular is it's reminiscent of the Summer of Love in 2020, BLM. You have companies jumping in. Well, let's just start with the media, actually. You have the media, you had ABC reporting, these are just a few people having fun watching cars burn. That's a quote from the mainstream media. That these are just a few people. It's just people having fun watching cars burn. Cars set on fire. These cars just combust. The cars just magically, spontaneously combusted, and these are just a few people just watching, enjoying the show. And that might be fun to watch. I don't know. You've got Maxine Waters saying, nothing has happened. Everyone is peacefully protesting. So what they're doing is the same thing that we've seen them do before. The same thing that we saw in 2020. The same thing that we saw in Kenosha, the same thing that we saw with George Floyd. These are fiery, but mostly peaceful protests. No, they're not. They're riots. And then I think the last thing that's super reminiscent of 2020 that really, it just happened today, is you're starting to see companies come out, brands. I think it's funny too. It's retail brands that are paving the way for this. PacSun comes out and they say, "Oh, we feel you. We stand with you, people in LA." Meanwhile, I'm sure their store is getting looted in Santa Monica. You know what I mean? So
Correct.
very reminiscent of 2020, and it's in the summer of love. It's an interesting strategy. We've also seen two other things: the Craigslist ads for paid protesters, and shoot, now I just blanked on the and the bricks, the pallets of bricks that just spontaneously appear in the middle of the street when these peaceful protests happen. So all of this is very interesting to me. I think that there's way more to it than what we've dug into thus far.
Well, it is centrally planned. It looks like it. So, but there's a lot of moving parts here. But joining us to discuss the national absolute disgrace is Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page, who is going to really lend a lot of help here to this. He's served on, the chairman of Sheriffs for Trump. Now he's a candidate for North Carolina Senate. Welcome, Sheriff.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let me ask you, why do you think riots like these in LA, the BLM riots, the Ferguson, Minneapolis, or even Raleigh and Charlotte after 2020, is this a policing issue or a political issue?
Well, I don't know the policies of the Los Angeles, in the area of Los Angeles with the police department, and I've watched that, and but I've listened also to the mayors and to the governor. If you don't have full support of the governor for the state on the rule of law, if you don't have full support of your mayor as a police chief, now as a sheriff, I work for the people, but as a police chief, you have to answer to the mayor and the city council and city manager and stuff like this. So it's a lot of people in between. But if they're not fully supporting law enforcement, it can lead to a bad situation, which you're seeing right now.
Yeah, for sure. Sean?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for being here, Sam. I think you really hit the nail on the head. I mean, if these officers in the streets don't have the support from their superiors, there's not much that they can do. I think, how have my first question to you would just be, how have the left and the media, I think you may have been on and heard me kind of touch on some of this a little bit, but how do you think that the left and the mainstream media have shaped the public's reaction to the riots and the looting? Do you think that there's a double standard in how they're framing political violence?
Well, I've heard it said before. It's not about the truth, of not about what's happening. It's about what what they're trying to portray. I go back. I've been in law enforcement for many years, 43 years, and 27 years as sheriff. And I watched what happened in Ferguson. If we go back to Ferguson, what was relayed out there to the public, it was a false narrative. And it affected that officer's life because the officer was doing his job. He was not found to doing anything wrong. But at the end of the day, what was being pushed out on the media, I think, helped to perpetuate the situation, which erupted into a violent situation in Ferguson. The problem is, coming from there, every law enforcement agency in America is affected when these situations occur, because then people start looking at other agencies. What do you do? And stuff like this. So I watched the situation in Ferguson when it first unfolded after the information on the non-indictment came forward. And then I watched how it progressed after that. And then again, I don't know, what authorities officers were allowed to do under their, city administrators and stuff like this, or their managers. But if you don't have the backing of your administrators, it's hard to do your job. That's why as a sheriff, we back our officers, we train our officers, we equip our officers. And when there's time of civil disorder and stuff like this, we do our jobs, and we have plenty of space in our jail. If we don't have the space, we'll contact the sheriff.
You're very creative. Sheriff, you're very creative about that. That's what we love about you. And from what I'm hearing is, there was number one, a stand down order. And number two, the feds or ICE specifically did not get any cooperation from the LA County jail. Their preference was to go into the jail, not make a scene, and apprehend these folks when there's a 42-hour mandatory hold. But because that wasn't happening, there's no other mechanism by which to get these illegals other than in the community. You can get them in the jail. That's the preference, right?
That's the safest way to do a prisoner transfer. If you have a person that's a criminal offender, transferring from officer to officer is always the safest way to go. Instead of releasing that person back out in the street where they can re-equip or get back in their element and be a danger to officers that may come to pick them up.
And that's exactly what happened. So, under Article 10, obviously, every city, every municipality has the right to police their own interior. As we discussed, and I think as Trump has learned, Democrats have illustrated time and again that they are willing to sacrifice their people to make a spectacle out of Trump. See, they let lawlessness occur. They let all the civil unrest occur. And then when Trump tries to come in and put down the rebellion, as it were, and enforce law and order, which he's elected to do, they try to make him to be the bad guy. And so this could have all been avoided had the sheriffs or the police cooperated with ICE. Would you agree with that?
I would say that if Governor Newsom would do his job as a governor and govern, and if the mayor would support the law enforcement there and let them do their jobs, there are many law enforcement agencies in California and surrounding Los Angeles. They probably have a lot of help there for mutual aid. I heard the chief say this under mutual aid assistance. There's plenty of help there. But when they can't get the support, and the president's going through this with Seattle and Oregon. There's different places that they have where they took over the communities, took over those blocks, and basically blocked law enforcement out, took over law enforcement police stations.
Atlanta, Atlanta. Remember where they were burning police stations? Police stations would form new training centers, etc. And for a couple of years, Sheriff, they continued. These same radicals, by the way, they travel from place to place. That's what we're finding. They will target law enforcement installations. And again, the reason why is because, yes, they're allowed to do that. But media has fostered this. And look, now X, this platform that we're on tonight, because X exists now, they're not going to be able to get away with perpetuating that narrative as they did in 2018, 2019, and 2020.
Yeah, I watched, and I believe you mentioned something this earlier here about the situation with the placement of the bricks. I saw where the bricks were thrown off the overpass. The rocks were being thrown down on the police cars. That could be deadly. And that shouldn't be tolerable. It looks like the rule of law is not being allowed to proceed as it's supposed to, equally for everybody, and also holding people accountable. And that's the problem when I see with the leadership in California is they don't seem to have any bit of accountability in the leadership or people in leadership roles. I'm not saying leaders, because just because you're in a leadership role doesn't make you a leader. Well, and I think you saw some examples I cited of what I watched with Governor Newsom, and of course, like I say, watching the mayor. I'm just
Karen Bass.
It concerns me because I'm seeing this can be happening in other cities also. I think some things are coming up in a few days here, and protests, and I have no problem with peaceful protests. But when you start throwing bricks and you start hurting people and you start damaging property, that's when the line's been crossed, and it's time to take action. So, and I commend the president on his efforts to bring the support there to help the people of Los Angeles.
Yeah, and they appreciate it too. Whatever the media says, the Democrats, they do. So this leads me right into my next question: what laws would you push or make a special point to enforce when you're in the NC Senate to crack down on sanctuary policies and to get serious about immigration enforcement at the local level?
Speaking of immigration enforcement, for about up until last December, I worked on a bill, a cooperation with ICE bill for the sheriffs. I worked through the association, through the legislature, and it took 5 years when we had the majority in North Carolina to get it passed. I didn't understand that. Now, wow. I do have information today. I was down at the legislature, and House Bill 318 was passed, and that bill will require goes through the governor, goes through the process. I'm sure that there'll probably be a veto conversation there, but if it can be overridden and that bill is passed, it will require all sheriffs to honor federal detainers and to notify ICE within 48 hours before they're released. Because the worst thing you can do is release a criminal offender that's illegally in the country back out in the community to reoffend, not only against American citizens, but people in the immigrant population. A lot of times they're victimized. So I guess answer to your question is I've worked for years on the immigration enforcement, how that applies here in North Carolina, seeing it from the border to North Carolina and trying to talk with sheriffs across the state about why it's important to pay attention to what's coming your way. Well, it's here now. I made that statement back in 2010, my first trip to Arizona. If we fail to secure our borders, every sheriff in America will become a border sheriff. Well, 3,000 plus sheriffs, and we're there. And so now we're having to deal with a situation of intentionally failed policy under the Biden administration, under Obama, and now we're reaping that situation because of the inaction in the rule of law.
Well, Sheriff, I want to point out that the bill that you're talking about, it's the Senate bill, started out as a Senate bill, and it's the Senate border protection bill here in North Carolina. And what it does is it closes the loopholes at the state level that the federal level left open. So it's like a partner bill. Every Democrat voted against that bill in the Senate in North Carolina. So if you're listening and you are a consultant on the Republican side, in other words, a good guy, I would take your candidate and run with that alone. Every single Democrat. That is insane. Democrats are dangerous. They're childish and they're not fit to lead. Sean, you have a question.
Yeah, I think, you touched on a couple of things. I think this leads right actually into my question. We talked about how the safest place to do this is when the individual is already in detention, right? They've already been detained and we pass them off. And you talked about, you also talked, I do want to point out that, we talked about the rocks being thrown at some of these officers and hitting the cars. But what a lot of people haven't seen, the less common video, the one that didn't go viral, it's somewhat viral. These officers are getting hit in the head with big pieces of stone thrown from a bridge. And, they've got helmets on and they're knocking the helmets off. So first of all, thoughts and prayers to them, and please keep them in your prayers. But I want to kind of keep on the topic that we were on and talk about the role that leaders, not necessarily, I guess, leadership roles, but not necessarily leaders play in this. You had the judge in Wisconsin who, pushed the illegal alien out the back door, which forced the ICE, the federal officials, to have to leave the courthouse. Now, when they're in the courthouse, they've gone through their metal detectors. The officers know the situation that they're in. Now you force him out. You let him out the back door. You escorted him out the back door. And you put officers now in a vulnerable position. I want to talk a little bit, though, about the role that these weak prosecutors, I don't even think weak is the right word. They're turning a blind eye. And these activist DAs, what does that role play in this civil unrest and the spiral that we've seen go from what they call peaceful protests to what we're seeing, which are fires in the streets, boulders being crushed up and thrown at the heads of ICE and law enforcement officials, and the absolute unrest that we're seeing? What role do these prosecutors and these activist DAs play, and how important is it that we address that?
It's very important. We've got a lot of good prosecutors across the country, but the prosecutors, their responsibility is to look at the violations and determine is it there for prosecution? Do all the elements match up for prosecution of that person for conviction? But the thing about it is you can't turn a blind eye. You said it. You can't turn a blind eye, and you must hold people accountable. That's the biggest problem I see in America today, that persons can do things, and in certain regions, certain areas of the country, you're right. It appears to be turning a blind eye. And we have got to hold people accountable. If we don't hold people accountable and hold them accountable to the rule of law, I think you're going to see more and more of this situation. And I got to say something. You're talking about illegal immigration. 10 to 12 million persons have gotten into our country during the Biden administration alone. 2 million gotaways have gotten our country, and we don't even know who they are. 350,000 criminal offenders were released back on the streets, which should have been turned directly over to the ICE officials. Okay. According to HSI, a lot of things were done wrong. And yet people talk about more laws. You don't need more laws. You need to just enforce the laws you have on the books.
Yep.
And if you come to America and you could commit crimes against American people or anybody else, you should be held accountable. I have due processes included in our Constitution. Yes, sir, it is. But at the appropriate time, you need to be removed from our country. And if you've done something that bad enough, if after you serve your time, you should be out and not coming back. Go to Kate Steinle case, 2015. How many times did that gentleman, that illegal alien gentleman, had been removed from the country? 5 or 6 times, and came back to California. And at that one time, it only took one time, and that pistol and a gunshot, and she's dead today. And and her family's grieving.
That's one case of thousands.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. But I'm saying that case, that's an example of not holding a person accountable, not having secure borders, not enforcing the interior enforcement capability of allowing them to do that. And as the years have progressed, where we're at today, but a lot of that came over the year. It took some years to get there, and it's going to take some time to fix this. But you've got a president who I've worked with. I work with his staff, his team. I communicate with some of his staff now. And what's important is to back them and support them, because they are trying to identify people that are harming people or potentially can harm people that are illegal in our country. And they need to be identified, processed, and removed.
Really quick though, Sloan, I think that there's a really important piece here. Sam, you mentioned about how if you've been saying for years, if we don't address the border issue, every sheriff becomes a border sheriff.
Yeah.
Yes,
but what we need to remember too is every town becomes a border town, and every neighborhood becomes a border neighborhood. And so I think even here in North Carolina, we've seen a massive influx of migrants, particularly illegal migrants. So I just want to point out, I think it's important to note, like what Sloan is saying, this is one case out of thousands. That's because it's not just,
not localized.
Health anymore.
Yeah. I mean, look at all the families that lost someone. I've testified in Congress a couple of times before House Judiciary Committee. We've had victims' family members there talking about how they lost a child because somebody was here in the country illegally and committed a crime against them. I watched and heard different situations. But at the end of the day, we must have border security.
Right. We must.
Homeland security begins at home.
Yeah.
It starts at our borders. When President Trump came in, he put the military on the border, and he backed up our DPS, Department of Public Safety, our troopers down from Texas down there. He's doing everything he can on that end. But here's one other thing that's been missed. The cartel, I got to say it, the Mexican drug cartel, there are multiple cartels, but the Sinaloa and these other cartels, New Generation, Jalisco cartel, these cartels are trafficking in the fentanyl that's killing thousands of people in our country. Thousands. They don't have to use a bullet. They use fentanyl.
Included. Well, yeah. And a couple of things we've talked about here. Number one, I just want to point out your opponent, who's Phil Berger, who is the Senate pro tem here. He's no fan of President Trump until recently. I've noticed that, number one. And number two, we also talked about the dangerousness of having partisan Democrat judges and prosecutors. I want to point out for the audience that your opponent, who is a Republican, has supported and made sure to try to get elect Democrat judges. That should have been an offense that was censored by the North Carolina GOP, because you don't ever back a Democrat against a Republican in a general election.
It's called party disloyalty.
It is. And while we're talking about rules and law and order, that has been overlooked. And I just would be remiss if I said that. But I do have another. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw something else also. Is I can tell you about myself that I worked to help get President Trump in office the first time.
Yep.
I worked with President Trump and his staff when he was in office to help him. And when he ran again, I was there for him. The thing is I call it Johnny come latelys. Yes. President Trump was a very popular guy, but where were you when he needed you? Where were you when he needed you? Myself and sheriffs all across this country supported and helped President Trump all the way through. And and the thing is, y'all brought this up, and I'm gonna throw it back, is you can't politicize public safety. When you do that, when you politicize public safety and national security, it is a deadly, dangerous situation. And that's kind of why we're in a situation today with 10 to 12 million people in our country. Many people that came over from other countries have not been properly vetted. Temporary protective status, which is supposed to be temporary. President Trump now has revoked some of persons under that status to be removed. Visa overstays, immigration parole, abuses of those systems. Mm-hmm. Again, under the Biden administration, a lot of those different measures in there that were allowed to help persons that were in other countries for certain reasons have been abused.
Yep.
And we've got to turn around, and we got to get back to what the laws say, and the laws will help us to better protect our citizens. Because if we remove criminal offenders, and I heard somebody say something this on TV last night, but if we look after the people in our communities and we remove the criminal offender, any criminal offender from the community, it does make your community safer, whether the person here illegal or not. So right. I'm just saying this, remove that bad guy off the street, and the streets can move safer. And also, again, but if you release that person back out into the community, I'll tell you right now, you can guarantee they're going to go somewhere else, victimize somebody, or victimize somebody in the immigrant population. Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff, I do appreciate the law, being proffered by the Senate, and that is your opponent's body. I do appreciate that, but we had the supermajority for the last several years, but in particular last year. So illegal immigration was a problem more so last year than it is now. And yet your opponent waits until you jump into the race to get tough on immigration. And I just want you to know that I see that. And I think a lot of other people
I think other people see that.
They do.
Because I've been working on this immigration work and border security work outside the sheriff's office as an extra project for about 14 years.
Yep. That's why we have you on. You are the pro. I mean, you are the Grand Mahar, if you will, of law enforcement in this state and around the country. And we're very lucky to have you on. I've got another question for you, though. So, and this is along the lines of illegal immigration. You've said this for years. I mean, you made an entire career off of this one thing, that illegal immigration is the top public safety issue. And now here you are, sadly being proven right. But I want to ask you, the laws are so important. The law that, again, has come out now. How does North Carolina's refusal to cooperate with ICE or detainers in Mecklenburg and Durham and Wake County and others make us more vulnerable as a state to future unrest or cartel-linked violence here?
Well, the truth of the matter is we do have cartel associates. They've been arrested. Again, they're involved in human trafficking and drug trafficking. If you want to deal with both those issues, you got to take it back to the cartel. One of the problems, and from an international perspective, when President Trump came in, they declared the cartel a narco-terrorist organization. And I said this many years ago to Secretary Napolitano when I was at a meeting in Washington. I said, why have you been so, under the Obama administration, why have you been so resistant to declare the Mexican drug cartel a terrorist organization? And her answer was, Sheriff, we're not at war with Mexico. Well, I tend to differ. And we've been at war with Mexico because when you take
it looks like it. Look at this. I want to show you. Does this kind of look like a war to you? Because it does to me.
Yeah. When you see something like that reminds you of the old days in Beirut and other different countries in the Middle East.
Yep.
That's not peaceful protest. That's not constitutionally protected. Look at these when they were throwing. I saw this last night.
Yeah, here's the video you were talking about, Sheriff.
Yeah, I saw that last night.
And there's another one, I think, Sean, you were talking about where the officers were standing there in their helmets. And so you're right. This harkens to the Middle East. And when I said in the opener, this isn't the fall of Baghdad you're looking at. This is Southern California, but much of the same techniques, which should tell the public why this is terrorism.
Well, again, I go back to, we don't know how many people have come into our country that didn't come here, even if they came here illegally, didn't come here from the intent for work and opportunity. They came here for other reasons, nefarious reasons. And that's what concerns me, because I've said this, with all the millions of persons who come in, what percentage of those persons come in have intent to do harm? And I worry about not just what happened on 9/11 and how tragic that was, but I'm worried about another.
Well, look what happened in Colorado, where that mean, evil, wicked Jew hater tried to burn Jews alive and damn near did. These are terrible.
Same period. Hey, Sloan, same period. How about the young man and young woman that were murdered outside of the museum?
I was there. I was actually there.
Yeah, right. You were up there. That's right.
I was there with Yaron Latinsky was in my my meeting, ironically, sadly, about Middle East terrorism and the fusion, actually, of Marxist groups, the Marxist ideology, and the PFLP, which you're very familiar with. Yeah. And that's a Marxist revolution that started basically the terrorism as we know it, suicide bombers, etc., in the Middle East. And so the fusion of those two groups, here we were during the day learning about that. And, 3 hours after we broke for the day, that very element claimed his life.
It's tragic. It shouldn't be happening. And, I saw that somebody wrote some words on that car that had burned up, that police car or vehicle out there. And here's another thing. There's so much a push. We work with federal, state, and local partners. We've been on several task forces. I have somebody on HSI task force, and the thing is, we work with our federal partners and we support them. And just because they work in immigration, ICE, and Immigration Customs Enforcement doesn't mean they didn't get the support, because we do. Now, my big push is in the jail situation. We get a detainer on someone. We aren't detainers, and we call now, and we'll call and make a note, come get that person within 48 hours. But the thing is I know some places around the country and stuff like this that they do not do that. And the thing is, it's just contributing to the situation here. But in North Carolina, I can say, and in my county, I can say this, is we work with all of our federal partners. And our intent is to make sure that we all work together as a force multiplier to protect our communities, starting at the lowest level, all the way up. And like I said, we'll work with our partners all the way up across the state. We have mutual aid agreements that we work with different agencies and stuff like this. And we're going to do our job, because at the end of the day, public safety is about protecting. The first responsibility of government is protecting its people. Yep. And that's what we're going to do.
I think that's what most of the officers, even in these jurisdictions where they don't cooperate, I think that's what most of these officers want to do.
Those officers have those restrictions, I'm sure. And I feel for them, because that's why I was listening to the chief speak the other night. And I know what he was saying. They've got help. They've got a bad situation, but they need the support of people in leadership roles. They need their support. And when they have it, they can get the job done. I guarantee there's many citizens there that are behind them 100%. But again, like I said, who they work for.
Exactly. I think to wrap us up, Sam, I want to ask you, if elected to the Senate, what's your message to the voters who are tired, the voters like me, who are tired of these soft on crime policies, and want actual consequences for these people who are breaking the law, these rioters, the illegal aliens, and the corrupt officials who are enabling them? What is your message to those? Well,
there are laws. And that's the thing. There are laws in effect right now that deal with these situations. If you're, I don't care if you're a governor, a mayor, or anybody else, if you're aiding and abetting in a crime, you're in violation of law, and you should answer that. That goes back to the prosecutors in the area, something like this. We've got great prosecutors, I know, in North Carolina, and I know a lot of them do a great job, and they have a lot of cases they have to try. But the key word is we've got to hold, as I'm held accountable as a sheriff, everybody needs to be held accountable in that chain to make sure they do their job and make sure that they protect and serve as they took that oath to do many years ago.
Yep. All right. So, Sheriff, what is your campaign website so everyone can check out your platform and tell us, Rockingham County, the election. You got a primary challenger. We talked a little bit about that. Where can we find you?
Well, my site is sampage4nc.com. And it tell you all the information you need. I appreciate everybody's help and consideration. I've said this before. This race I'm in is going to be viewed as one of the biggest races in the state, and I need everybody's help. But it won't be won on millions of dollars. It'll be won on relationships I've built over the past 27 years with the people of Rockingham County and surrounding. And Guilford County is a new area as far as responsibility. But the thing is, the people of Guilford County also know me through my work as a sheriff in our county for 27 years.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Sheriff Page, and we will see you very soon. Thank you.
Sean, Sloan, thank y'all very much, and I appreciate it. Y'all try to be safe and have a good night now.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. All right. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here. I mean, that was a heavy conversation, but needed. I mean, this is sadly, the number one story that leads in the country, but the number two, actually, that we've been getting from our viewers here. And I saw so many of you this weekend. We had a huge convention turnout. We had just had our state convention at the GOP. We had them every year, actually every 2 years. But I wanted to bring on someone who can actually give us a great perspective of what went on at the convention and from a different point of view. I know that we kind of argue a little bit back and forth, but it's all in good fun, Dallas. Right?
Of course it is. Absolutely.
We have a good time. So you're former NCGOP executive director, so you know a lot about how things work. And now you're with American Majority PAC. You were with Americans for Prosperity. We all know that. And so I want to ask you this. You and I were at the GOP convention. What stood out to you as the most as far as wins, warning signs, or both? What were you encouraged? What do you think?
Well, I don't know that I saw anything at the convention that I saw as winning signs or warning signs. I think we have a lot of excited delegates. We had a pretty good election in 24. It's never perfect. It's never great. You never get all you want, but a pretty good election. And I will say, as somebody who staged 4 of those, I give tremendous credit to the staff at the NCGOP headquarters. I thought that was the smoothest one that I had been to. These things are tremendously difficult to put on. And I think I had 1 bad one and 3 really, really good ones. The 2016 convention was not what it needed to be, from a operation standpoint. And we worked hard on that for a year. But I think they outdid themselves and they got their business done. They did it in a timely fashion. So I credit them for that.
Yeah, I was really impressed because when we have to vote on things, you guys, like resolutions or, who's going to be the vice chairman and the chairman. 2 years ago, we had a little snafu with an app and a lot of consternation about that. This year, we did it with paper ballots as requested. I thought, the chairman and everyone that ran the convention did a pretty damn good job in making sure that we were able to do that. I thought it was pretty efficient. And
Sloan, I'll tell you a little story about that. It's kind of funny. I am not at these conventions. I'm not anti electronic voting altogether. I actually introduced it for the first time. And by the way, this is not a judgment on how anybody else did it after I left. They did whatever they did for the reasons they did. And seems like whatever happened last year or whenever that, they would recognize some of that didn't work. We brought in a company that and it was very expensive, by the way. And I'm sure that's one holdup, where what happens is you would go in and everybody would get their own clicker, their own remote control. And, but we didn't use it for the elections of people. In other words, I'm not sure that year we had we didn't have, I don't think, maybe we had a chairman's race one year and then the national committee another year. And we didn't do it in those elections, but I actually liked that. It's not dependent sort of on the wireless of the hotel. It is very expensive. And I'm sure that was a holdup. But these things take time and they did a good job.
So I think Dallas on that point, I mean, like looking forward into 2026, what races both in North Carolina, but also nationally, are shaping up to be, the bellwether battles?
Well, I mean, in North Carolina, we have two that are critically important. We have another state Supreme Court race with the most activist liberal activist parading around as a judge,
Yeah.
anybody's ever seen, and Anita Earls, who is really a destructive force on the court, in my opinion. But she is an incumbent. And of course, you have the challenge that traditionally a midterm, is more favorable to the party that's out of power rather than the White House. And of course, we have the U.S. Senate race. There's some other key races. I mean, Republicans will make another shot at to try to win Don Davis in the first district. Sometimes I think people forget on our side. I'm a college sports fan, and I'm an NC State fan, and my friends will call me up. We couldn't do this in this game. We didn't do that in this game. We didn't do this. And I have to remind them sometimes. The other side has scholarship players too. And some of their people that won in 24 were really good candidates. I mean, they're not of my ideological pick, but they were good candidates, and they raised more money and they did things.
Right.
But I mean, the two big races are the Senate and of course the state Supreme Court race. And then we have 3 Court of Appeals races. And what's interesting is somebody's going to correct me. I think there are 14, 15, 16 members of the Court of Appeals. My buddies are going to yell at me, but it's somewhere around there. And there's only 3 Democrats. I think it's 14. Okay, I may be wrong.
Yeah.
But it's something like that. I think so. There are 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats. 12, 13. Make sure that adds up to 14. But
I got that math for you. I don't know much math, Dallas, but I got that one. So,
but for whatever reason, due to the calendar, whatever else, all 3 of the seats that are open on the Court of Appeals are currently held by Democrats. And of course, that's also the case with the Supreme Court, right? I mean, God forbid if the Republicans lost all those races, they would be no worse than they were today, numerically on those courts.
Well, numerically, but that says a lot for the health of the party. I'm sure you'll agree with that.
Well, I mean, those are important races, and we have to do everything we can to win, as their side will.
So, look, as we're talking,
and by the way, let me get back to Sean a question. So that's what's important in North Carolina. North Carolina is a purple state. It's a very closely divided state. If you were to look at North Carolina politically, kind of like a semester-long series of grades, like they might do in college, and you throw out our best performer, somebody like Steve Troxler, like the high end, you throw out him, and you throw out their best performers, and then you throw out their low and our low. You get into the middle where statewide races are decided by 2 or 3 points. And not only are we very closely divided, we happen to be at the time very inelastic. I mean, Trump did tremendously better in 24 than he did 20 in North Carolina. He went from 1.3% to 3.4%. And that was a huge gain.
Well,
it's still 2 points. It's still 2 points.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very inelastic.
There wasn't mail-in ballots, but I wanted to, that's a good reason. So I wanted to ask you this, because we're talking about Tillis. My feelings on Tillis. Other people may have other feelings, but that's kind of how the party is on our side. When we have a very big rift, if you will, and you've seen the battle between grassroots conservatives and establishment Republicans. We've seen how that played out in the Council of State races big time, which you and I both were involved in.
Okay, I have to stop you here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because
I might mind. I may mind.
So
what do you think? There's a big.
Well, I just wanted to say that I reject one part of the premise of that question. Okay. And for example, if we're talking about the people that came to the convention this weekend, the roughly 2,000 activists, they are all grassroots. They come up through the county parties. They are part of the Women's Federation. They knock doors. They make phone calls until a lot of them are simply not able to do that anymore. Let me
define the term. I think it'd be helpful if I define the term.
Okay, and then I might redefine it for myself.
Okay. Well, let's get ourselves all synced up. When I say grassroots as a candidate, I'm talking about, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble, but I've run campaigns before, so I'm going to be very honest. Someone that basically has no infrastructure, right? They're
Short on money.
there for the people, someone that has done, stump speeches, et cetera. They don't have any PAC backing or any institutional backing. It's hard winning like that. You may be able to win a primary, but it's very hard. And so there is a perception.
And it's harder the bigger the race is. I mean, you can do that on the, maybe on the, Blowing Rock Town board. You can go knock on the door of every voter and talk to them individually, but you can't do that statewide, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's not practical, and so there's a division here, and I'm specifically talking about the Tillis race, and I just want to be very clinical about it because Sean, you and I mean, we've talked about this all the time on the podcast. So you've got grassroots activists, okay, who basically are a big part of some part of the base, right? They just won't vote for him. That's what they're saying. And so, you've got a faction that will. And so, I see it as signs of trouble. Now, you don't have to implicate yourself in who you prefer to win, or we don't even have a primary candidate in my mind that's actually viable at this point.
Well, I mean, in all disclosure, I've done things to help Tillis in the past, and I will vote for Tillis.
Okay, but how are we going to do this? I guess here's what I'm going to ask you: how to bring together these two factions, right? Whatever you want to call them, because there's some of us, we're just not, we just cannot stomach doing it. So if he's not, what are we going to do?
Okay. So let me answer this in a slightly different way. And I'm going to take us back since we were just at the convention. Okay. I would divide I worked at the Republican Party. I think, I was one of the longest serving executive directors they ever had. I think that makes me establishment by definition. Okay. I don't really like that term, but I'll take it for here. What else is interesting when somebody runs as grassroots, I'm not establishment. They want to be party chair. They want to be district chair. And they say, I'm an outsider. I'm not establishment. Well, guess what? If you win your establishment, you're in the party the very next day. So yeah. I would divide it up. What I think we saw and what has been consistent, not exactly over my time involved in this, is there's about and nobody be offended because there's no perfect way to phrase this, but at the convention, for example, I think there's 60 to 65% pretty constantly that you might call establishment. And to some degree they are, right? They're the established rules, the established procedures, how we've done things for a long time. And the reason we've done a lot of those things is they work. I think those people are not always as, they certainly vote in primaries. They have opinions in primaries, but I think it's their view that a weak Republican is better than a good Democrat on any day. Okay. And I think they view, the party's role as helping elect, and this is certainly my view, that the state party's role is to help turn out the vote, and we'll talk more about this later, of Republican and Republican leaning and Republican minded folks, or in this case, Trump people, because a lot of those people, not necessarily Republicans, and turning them out in a numeric sense that other candidates have a chance to win too. Okay. Well, and that's the role. And I think the typically, and I think they're in a minority view, but that doesn't make them wrong on everything. And they're my friends. I think they think the party ought to take a harsher line. If in their mind, a candidate gets, or a elected official gets out of line, or an elected official casts a vote, they think that the state party or some mechanism ought to have some kind of punishment force. Yeah. I don't believe in any of that. I think here's what I'd say: if if you're not happy with Tom Tillis, there's two things you can do. One, you can call him up, get to his office, email him, that kind of stuff, traditional stuff, or you can go try to beat him in a primary. I mean, that's how it works. I think the state. I am a belief that the greatest. I'm just going to pick two or three of the greatest successful things that I think are successful organizationally. Okay, in our society. I, I would say the right to life people are very successful and they do. I would say the NRA and the people that are concerned about the Second Amendment are pretty successful in that they do. And the reason is they stick to the mission. They are laser-like focused on the mission. To me, the state party's role has, I mean, it raises some money. It does some communication. I mean, during some very difficult times, I went out and put myself in the foxhole to take the bullets to keep it off of our candidates. That's part of the role. But the central, most important role is turning out the vote. And it's not a sexy thing. It's not, it is numeric. So
Alice, on that note, I think, because we are close to time.
Diet Coke, by the way, in case somebody's wondering,
American majority isn't just about election day, right? Because you're also training leaders for what comes after. So I guess just to close this, would you kind of give us a glimpse into what does the after we win kind of look like, and why is that important?
Well, here's what I think we face in 2026, and thank y'all for joining me today, or me to join you. I'm sorry. First of all, let me just wrap up this one thing about the convention and these battles. And I hate to use the word battles because I think it makes everybody better. If there's a primary and somebody else wins other than Tillis, they'll be a better candidate for a competitive primary. Tillis will be a better candidate for a primary. He'll be a better elected official. He'll hear the voters. I think with great opportunity, and I think the most important thing is we have to think about an opportunity, also comes great challenges. What I think our people have yet to understand, and American Majority and American Majority Action, two organizations I lead, we're working on, is we have to walk through people that the GOP Trump coalition is very different than it was 10 years ago. Okay. It is now a lower propensity. How did Trump win? Lots of low propensity voters, lots of voters that are working class. And it's not that they're uneducated. Okay. They're plenty educated. They're smart people, but they are not Fox News viewers. They're not Newsmax viewers. They are at their bowling league. They are at the little league game. They're not quite as engaged. So, for a long time, I think we as Republicans thought, all things being equal, and they rarely are, that a midterm election kind of favors us, a more informed voter set with a lower turnout. That is completely flipped on its head. Completely flipped on its head. We won the Senate race and a lot of races in 2014 with a fairly low turnout. If we had that again in 2026, I think we would lose. We've got to get higher turnout. We have to embrace early voting. And more importantly, and I think this is a conversation we'll have to have another time when we have a little more, can expand upon it. How do we build on, grow, feed, and nurture this new coalition that, and quite frankly, Sloan, it includes people who are interested in the state of Israel, who probably were Democrats all their lives. African American, mostly single African Americans, 50 and under, Latinos,
males,
young, a coalition of young voters. You just can't say young voters because voters age, but young voters, especially that came up during the COVID times, are particularly in the GOP, and but a lot of them like Trump. And look, they had to make a choice. Not all of them all like Trump, but they had to make a choice of, a guy that was senile, and B, the party that tried to run a guy that was senile. Okay. So, so I would say that we have to figure out a way to build that coalition. We have to make it a point to try to win early voting again. We won it for the first time in this last election, and for some of our traditionalists, I need them to understand that early voting, even same day registration, and some of these things we didn't like very much, they're now our friends.
That
They
used
are
to be
things that work for
heresy.
us.
That used to be heresy. And I remember during the campaign, full disclosure, I helped out Elon Musk PAC. And our job was to get early voting numbers up with personal calls and text messages all across the state. And I mean, I think we need to deploy that kind of effort in the early voting stages. It even started a couple of weeks before early voting began. So I think
we've got to start a long way.
Yeah.
I would say the challenge is we've got to start talking to those low propensity voters now. But more importantly, we have to listen to them. What are they thinking? What do they like about what Trump's doing? What do they not like? Do they understand the stakes that if the Democrats take the U.S. House, we're going to go through another impeachment circus, that the immigration problem will not be better, it will be worse, that crime will not be better, it'll be worse, you know. And so, but the first thing is we just got to start, we just got to talk to people. We got to, our coalition is different, it is growing, it has to be fed, it has to be nurtured, and we've got to talk to people that we're not used to talking to.
Well, I'm going to close it up with this. We're actually going to talk to people because, as you're well aware, the Democrats have spent $20 million on a project that studies the syntax via social media of regular guys because they don't know how to talk to them. And they even hired this. I use the term.
Couldn't we done this for? Couldn't Sloan and I? Couldn't we have done this for $1 million?
Yeah, I mean, look, we
$1 million. I'll do it for free.
Yeah, exactly. We'll put Sean to work right away.
Well, but if they've got that kind of money around, I ain't doing it for free. It's just insane. See, one thing I think that the Democrats have a problem with is they've got to rectify what Biden tried to do, and they went along with it. Right? I mean, they have lost the trust.
Dallas, they're still going. There's still a majority of them. I know that you saw this. Josh Stein joined other Democrat wackos from across the country, and he's in a relatively conservative state, and signed this preposterous letter saying that Trump fighting the insurrection, the illegal insurrection that we see down there with the cars, the burning, the looting, worse than BLM, by the way. Just the very fact that Trump is enforcing the law, he's perpetuating the problem, and he is the bastard of this whole situation. So that is, by the way, that's another 80-20 issue that 80% of the country.
Yeah, explain this to me. The Sloan, the Democrats went, we've been on the wrong side of a bunch of 80-20 issues. Can we get on the wrong side of 95-5? Can we be for rioters and I mean just nuts.
Yeah,
but here's what I was trying to say.
Stop. Yeah.
Is it Biden was a problem and they lost trust over it, but the part that they just nowhere close to accepting is that he was losing before his health became the total focus. They were losing because they got a lot of what they wanted. I mean, huge spending, open borders, and it was all a disaster. So let me tell you what's going to happen in 28. Okay. And Republicans need to remember this. This is important. And right now it's fun to just see, other than when it has really bad real world consequences like we're seeing in California.
Yeah. It's
kind of fun to see the Democrats just completely out to lunch and melting down. But here's a lesson. Political parties are not in the suicide business. They're not. They are in the business of winning elections. And they will figure some things out, and they will have a probably pretty good nominee in 28, because I think they'll do this. I think what will happen is we'll see if it works for them. I think you will see, what Bill Clinton had to do when he won in 92 is he had to first run in the Democrat primary against the wing that had lost 3 consecutive presidential elections, the liberal wing.
The master of triangulation.
That's right. The liberal wing of Carter, Dukakis, and Mondale. And quite frankly, Clinton was a lot more moderate on some things, right? I mean, I never voted for him. And his personal behavior.
Did. I actually voted for Clinton.
His personal behavior was disgusting. But once we got the Republican Congress, the last 4 years of the Clinton time frame in American history, from 96 to 2000. I mean, it wasn't a bad time in the United States. So what they're gonna have to do is they're gonna have to have a candidate that sort of runs against what Biden did, runs against that wing of the party, and they're going to have to defeat it. And then only then will they have a credible nominee
Could be
in
Fetterman.
26. If they don't do that, then they're
Could
toast.
be Fetterman or Richie Torres, who's my favorite little guy. Okay, so we're gonna have to run. Thank you very much. We're gonna have to have you on again. You are the I was gonna say wizard. I don't even know if wizard and politics go together, but you're the grand poobah of strategy, and we're gonna have you.
Or I'm just the oldest rat in the barn.
That's one way to put it.
Okay. You said it, not me, but I'm just saying. We're going to have you on again. And thank you very much. So American Majority, where do we find that? Give us your website as we close out.
You can go to AmericanMajority.org. You can also find me on X at Dallas Woodhouse. And if you happen to be in the middle part of the state, we're doing a training in Greensboro. I train candidates. I also train on other things, but this is a candidate training. Part of it is designed for school board members. Part of it is designed for any candidates. It's on the 21st of June. You can find out on our website at AmericanMajority.org, or you can just hit me up. People know how to get a hold of me.
We're going to keep promoting that one because people ask us all the time. So thank you again, guys. I will be in Vegas on Thursday, so we're not having a show, and Margot is still at the beach. So we are able to take vacation here, damn it. So we're going to have a well-earned vacation, and we will see you again next Tuesday. Thank you again, and have a great night. Sean, as always.
You got it. Thanks, Dallas. Thanks for having me, Sloan.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's a wrap on today's NC Political Tea. We hope you're leaving sharper, spicier, and ready to take on the political craziness in the Tar Heel State. If you loved what you heard, or even if it made you mad, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this show with your friends, family, and that one coworker who just needs the truth. Follow us on social media to stay in the loop and get your daily dose of conservative fire. And remember, here in North Carolina, the grassroots grows stronger when we stand together. Until next time, keep the faith, keep up the fight, and don't let the left water down your tea. This is NC Political Tea, where we spill it like it is.